How offended are you when someone misrepresents God or his people, or when they lie about him, say that he is something that he isn't, or that Christians are something that they aren't? How offended do you feel when the Bible is misrepresented or twisted or changed or used in the wrong way? If this offends you, then the next question would be, what do you do about it? Do you take a stand for God? Are you offended enough to step out and say something? Do you have the desire? Do you have the courage? And do you have the faith to fight for the Lord? That is the question today. That is what a champion is able to do. And so today we're going to be talking about one of the people who fought physically for God and how he was God's champion, and then how we can be a champion for the Lord also, using the things that David has done in order to teach us how to better be champions for the Lord. And so, just as a little bit of a backstory, if you will remember, God chose Saul to be the very first king of Israel. And at first, the people didn't really accept him all that well. But after his very first battle against the Ammonites, where they were able to defeat them, the people accepted him. But after that, they had 2 consecutive battles, one of them against the Philistines, where he offered unlawful sacrifices, and another against the Ammonites when he did not defeat them completely, as God had told him to. And so the people had accepted Saul as their king after the first battle. But after the next 2, whenever he didn't do what God wanted him to do, God rejected him. And he selected David to replace him as king, although Saul doesn't know that. He knows that God has selected a replacement, but he doesn't know who that person is. And in the meantime, Saul is continuing to be the king of Israel, but the Spirit of the Lord has left him and it has gone to David. So that's what we know so far. Well, the Philistines continue to be a problem for Israel. And their military has at this point in chapter 17 entered the border of Judah. And so normally, they would stay on their border and maybe the people in Israel would be on their border, and then they would come together and fight there in the middle. But the Philistines are getting bolder, and so they've come into just inside the border of Israel, and they're encamped there in the valley of Elah. And they think that if they can gain control of that valley, then they can get control of the whole hill country, which would be a great amount of space. And that covers everything from the river to the sea. It's just a strip east to west from those 2 bodies of water. And it encompasses, Bethlehem, Jerusalem. It's the area that is Judah's land, Benjamin's land, that area there. And so that's what they're seeking to gain. They have encamped on a mountain there in the valley of Elah, and the Israelites have come out and encamped on a mountain to their north, and they have this valley that's laying below. And so they're in a face-off. And then one specific man named Goliath comes out and challenges the Israelites. And he says, hey, why should both of our armies fight? I'll fight for my side, and you pick someone to fight for your side. And then whoever loses will have to be the servant of the winner. Let's do it that way so that both of our armies don't have to die. And so he's presenting himself as the Philistine champion. A champion we think of, or at least I did today, think of a champion as the winner. Somebody that steps out, yes, but that is the winner. But that's not the case. A champion, the literal term means one between 2. And so he's standing up between the 2 armies, representing his side. And he's asking Israel to select a champion for themselves to fight him. But the problem is the Philistine champion is huge. It says that he is 6 cubits in a span. which is 9 feet 9 inches tall. And he is presenting himself in this bronze helmet, and he has bronze leg guards on. And then he has a plate of armor that is just several plates overlapping each other that are sewn to a piece of leather. And so this is, his entire breastplate. And then he has a javelin strapped between his shoulder blades, and the plate of armor weighs 125 pounds, and the tip of his spear is made of iron, and it weighs 15 pounds. And then the handle of it is woven wood. And so this is how he's coming out presenting himself. He also has an armor bearer that is standing in front of him. Most likely he has a little shield, a small round shield that he carries in one of his hands. But then he also has a man that walks in front of him with a full body shield. And so he's coming out in all of his gear, and he's a huge man, and he's saying, hey, I'll fight for my side. Who do you have to fight for your side? And Israel's like, nobody that wants to fight you. You are huge. We're all going to die. And the only one that is even close to this man's size is Saul, right? Remember that when God selected him as their king, he said that Saul was shoulders and head taller than everyone else in Israel. And so, according to stature, he would make the most sense, but it also doesn't make sense to send your king as the one person that's going to fight. It's a little different for the king to go out with his army, because he's not going to be in the front lines, and most likely he'll be protected. He's commanding or something of that nature. But to send him out as the sole person that fights for you makes no sense, because if you lose your king, then you're in trouble. So even though Saul would make the most sense in that way, he makes the least sense in the fact that he is the king, and no one else is willing to fight him. And so what we're told in the story is that this Philistine comes out every morning and every night for 40 days and says, hey, come out and fight me, and taunts them and tells them they're chicken and all of the things that you can imagine that he would say to try to lure someone out to come and fight him. And at this moment, David's 3 oldest brothers are in the army of Saul, and they're there out in the front lines, sitting there watching all of this play out, facing off with the Philistines. And David's father, it says, is older at this time, and so he can't travel for himself. And so he calls David and says, hey, I need you to get somebody else to take care of the sheep for a little while, because I want you to go and check on your brothers. It's been 40 days of this, and I have no idea what's going on. Take them some grain and some bread and some cheese, and give some of that to them and some of that to their commanders, and then check on them and report back and let me know how things are going. And so David does get someone to take care of the sheep for him. And then it says that he takes 5 gallons of grain and 10 loaves of bread and 10 pieces of cheese out to his brothers. And when he gets there, he immediately hears the giant Goliath coming out, taunting Israel. And he's appalled. He's like, what in the world is going on? I'm actually going to read you word for word what it is that he says, because I want you to hear in his own words. He says, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away Israel's reproach? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And so he's calling him an uncircumcised person because he is not of God's people, which are the circumcised people. So basically he's just saying, who is this godless man that is coming against God's people? Who does he think he is? Somebody should kill this man, And so he says, what is the king going to give to the person that kills him? And his brother, his oldest brother, Eliab, hears him, and he thinks, he's mad at his brother for even being there in the first place. And here's what he says to him. He says, why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see this battle. And so he says, you have responsibilities at home, David. What are you doing down here? You just want to see what's going on? You're just curious. And so you're, shirking the responsibilities at home just to come down here and fulfill your own curiosity. And David, just as a little brother would, he says, what have I done now? Was it not just a word? And so basically he's like, yeah, I know. I'm the little brother. I always do everything wrong. Here again, can't do anything right. What is your problem? I was just asking a question, man. And so then David just turns his back to him. He's like, whatever. You're always mad at me. I don't care. Anyway, what is the king going to give to the person that defeats him? And the people say, the king says that he will first give his daughter in marriage to the man that defeats this Philistine. He will also give him great riches, and he will exempt his entire family from taxes and service to the government. And Saul somehow gets wind of the fact that David is asking about this. And so he's like, oh, somebody wants to fight the giant? Send him over here. Let's talk. And when David gets there, he says to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And Saul's like, you're not able to fight against this Philistine. You are just a young man. And this guy has been fighting since he was your age. He is an established warrior, is basically what he's saying. He's like, you have no experience in this. You're young, and he is older than you, and he's been doing this for a long time. You've got no chance. And here's what David says. He says, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when there came a lion or a bear that took the lamb from the flock, then I would go after him, and I would strike him, and I would deliver the lamb out of his mouth. If he arose against me, I would catch him by his beard and strike him and kill him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And so David's like, I may not be an accomplished warrior, but I've killed, very wild animals in protection of my father's sheep. And this is my heavenly Father's flock. Our nation, the nation of Israel, is God's people. And so I protect my father's sheep in the fields, and I can protect my father's people here. I know that God's going to give me that ability. He's already given me the ability to kill these beasts whenever they take one of my father's sheep, and he will give me the ability to kill this Philistine. And he protects me every time from them, and I know he's going to protect me from this man also, because this man is defying not only God's people, but God himself, because he has the nerve to speak against God's people, right? And so Saul can't, argue with this, what faith David has. And so he says, okay, God be with you. Let me dress you in some armor if you're going to go fight him. And so he gives him the same type of armor that Goliath has. He gives him a bronze helmet, and he gives him a breastplate and a sword. And David walks around a little bit, and he's like, I can't move around in these things. I'm not used to this. I just need to use the weapon that I'm used to. Thanks, Saul, but I know how to fight. I've got to use the weapons that I know how to fight with, and I don't need the armor that you give me, because I have the armor of God. God is shielding me. God is my protector. And so I already have a protector in God, and I already have weapons that I've been using for a long time. I know how to use those weapons. I don't know how to use these. And so I don't want to be dealing with something that I've never used before in, kind of the most important battle of my life, right? And so he leaves there, and he goes to the brook, and he selects 5 smooth stones, and he puts them in his pouch. And then he takes his staff in his hand, and he approaches Goliath. And when Goliath sees him, it says that he looked on him with disdain, and he saw that he was just a young boy, and that he was ruddy and handsome. And it says that the Philistines said, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And then he cursed David by his own gods. And so basically he's like, you look like you're fighting off a dog rather than an established warrior. I don't know who you think you are, but your weapons are child's play in comparison to what I've got, and you got no business here. Like, young kid, poor you don't seem to understand what's going on. And then he says to him, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field." And this is David's response to him. He says, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." You defied God, and now I'm coming at you in his name. And this day, that Lord, the one you're defying, will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down, and I will cut off your head. And then I will give the bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field, and the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves, not with a sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. And so David says, you're coming at me with manly weapons, but I'm coming at you in the power of the God who you're defying. So see how well that works out for you, because he is way more powerful than you. And you think you're going to kill me and feed my body to the birds? I'm going to kill not only you, but many of the people in your nation. And when those people fall to the earth, the whole earth is going to know that God is the one that saves, and God has the power, and that all of these weapons don't matter, and that you defying him was a big mistake. So let's go. And so it says that the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, and David ran quickly to the battle line to meet the Philistine. And then he put his hand in his bag, and he took out a stone, and he slung it, and he struck the Philistine in the forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. And so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and he struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. And so David ran, and he stood over the Philistine, and he took his sword, and he drew it out of the sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. And so David, because he doesn't have all of this heavy armor on that Saul was trying to give him, he's completely unencumbered by it and by fear, because he has the shield of God with him. And so he rushes towards Goliath as soon as Goliath starts to come to him. And because he has this sling that he's very familiar with using, he rushes at him, grabs a rock from the pouch as he's running, and in one smooth motion begins to sling it around and slings this rock out with so much power as he's running that he strikes him right between the eyes, and he falls face down to the ground. All of this because David is trusting in the weapon that he knows how to use, and he is relying on God. And then in a hilarious turn of events, he goes to Goliath and takes Goliath's sword, since he doesn't have one, and cuts his head off with his own sword. And then at this point, the people are like, "Oh no, we're not honoring that agreement to be servants of these people. We're gone." And so they start running back to their territory, thinking that maybe if they can get back to their own borders, that Israel will leave them alone. And Israel chases them and kills many of them, just as David said. He's like, "I'm going to kill a host of the Philistines." And when they fall face down to the earth, then the earth is all going to know that this is what has happened, that God is the one that is given this victory. And so all of that happens exactly like David said that it would. And the people, when they finally reach the two major cities across their border, Ekron and Gath, then the Israelites turn back, go back to the Philistine camp and plunder it, because, they've obviously left all of their things behind. And then David takes the armor of Goliath off, takes it to his tent, and then grabs Goliath's head and heads towards Saul to show him that he has killed the giant. Well, in the meantime, Saul has heard that he killed the giant, and he's asking his commander, Abner, who is this guy's father? And the way he asked it almost sounds as if he doesn't know who David is. He's like, almost sounds like he says, who is this guy? But he's not. He's literally asking who is his family, because remember, he is going to give tax exemption and exemption from service to David's family. And yes, David has been serving him as a musician for off and on all of this time. And he did send a letter to David's father asking for his permission for his son to go back and forth between the two. But he may not have even known who his dad was. He may not have remembered the name. This may have been a document drafted by someone else, and he just signs it, and then they take it to the dad. Maybe he's been told the dad's name one time or whatever, but he doesn't remember who David's family is. So this isn't saying that he's asking, like, who is this guy, David, that goes and kills Goliath? He's just trying to find out who is his family, because he knows that he is going to, need to give his family the things that he's promised them. And Abner's like, I got no idea who his dad is. And so Saul waits until David comes to him with Goliath's head in his hand. And Saul's like, awesome. I saw that you killed him. I want to honor my commitment to give your family tax exemption and exemption from service, and give you all the riches and my daughter in marriage. But I need to know, who is your dad? And he says, my dad is Jesse the Bethlehemite. And so Saul says, all right, that's great.